Okay, Sue, we are ready to begin.
Okay, welcome everyone. I'm Sue Keisler, Executive Director of xMinds, which is the organization hosting this lunchtime presentation by Judy Bass. For those of you who aren't familiar with xMinds, we're a volunteer-led nonprofit dedicated to improving education for autistic students here in Montgomery County. Today's topic is, what are our options for the transition year after high school? This topic arose out of discussions in our monthly discussion group for parents of autistic high school and middle school students. This is a group that is open to anyone, and Melissa, can you put the link in the chat for anyone who would like to find out more about it or consider joining it? You can click on that link. So when the topic of what to do in our first year after high school came up in our discussion, I turned to the perfect person to address this, and that is Judy Bass. Judy is a certified educational planner and the founder of Bass Educational Services in Olney. On a personal note, I met Judy when my son, who's autistic, was a senior in high school 8 years ago. And during that last year of high school, it was very clear to us that he wasn't going to be ready to go to college. We didn't know if college would ever be the right path for him, but we needed help figuring out what to do next. We turned to Judy Bass, and she was absolutely great. She knew about every possible program out there and which ones were the ones that were likely to work best for my son. She debriefed us after we visited each of the programs. She helped my son complete all his applications. She was just very caring and very knowledgeable, and ultimately steered my son into a transition year program away from home. And then the next year he started at a very supportive college that worked out really well for him. So I have great admiration for Judy, and I'm really thrilled to have her here today with us. Before we start the presentation, I just want to quickly mention three housekeeping items. First, simultaneous interpretation in Spanish is available. If you want to listen in Spanish, please select the interpretation button on the Zoom menu down at the bottom. Also, I want to make sure everyone knows we are recording this, and it's being recorded both in English and Spanish. Second, audience members, please keep your microphones muted. This is not a webinar, it's a meeting. So that means that you actually do have the ability to unmute. So please be careful not to do that accidentally. And third, Judy will take your questions once she finishes her short presentation. So that's going to be around 12:25. At that time, we'll call on people to ask their questions out loud. And if you're more comfortable putting your questions in the chat, that's fine too. You can submit your questions in the chat at any time. You don't have to wait until the presentation is over. And Judy will answer those questions as well as any that are asked during the Q&A portion. So Judy, thanks again for being here. I'll turn it over to you now.
Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction, Sue. And it's been a pleasure working with you and your son, of course, as well. Let me see about sharing my screen. Can everybody still hear me?
I'm hearing you, yes.
Okay, I don't know what happened there. I had something beeping. Okay, let me see if I can. Sorry, I'm just trying to start the slideshow here. Okay, so, well, just to give you a little bit about my background, I have been an educational consultant for about 22 years, and I have been working with students with all kinds of learning challenges over that time. My background is as a teacher, and through the years, I've just been working with a lot of students who I realized did not have what they needed to be ready for college right away. My own daughter is sort of what was the impetus behind this. She is now much older, but before I started this, when I was looking at colleges for my older daughter, I realized that how am I going to find something for my younger daughter? Nobody has any answers for me. And so I started researching schools and programs and realized that there's no way that parents can do all this. So every time. So I started, looking into the profession and became a consultant so that I could help those kids that really needed the support to find the right place. So what I'd like to talk to you about today is what the options are. And if you have questions, please put them in the chat, and we will be answering them at the end of the presentation. And if you want to ask the question yourself personally, you can do that also at the end. but I usually recommend that you put them in the chat so you don't forget them. Okay. All right, so. There we go. So today we're going to talk a little bit about what it means to be ready for college, because that's really important as well. And what are some alternatives to that? What are some alternative programs that you can think about instead of going to college or before going to college? And then also, what types of accommodations are there in college, and what are some resources for you to look at to seek these out? So what I'd like to first talk about is, what is the ultimate goal? Everybody thinks about, is it getting into college? What's the goal? College, a job, earning a degree, having a vocational degree, finding a career. To me, the ultimate goal, if it will show up here, is for the student to develop into an independent, resilient young adult capable of living on their own to the extent that they're able. That's different for everyone. So there is no one right path. And that's something to think about for your own child or for a student you're working with. What's the best path for that student? Because we all want the same thing. We all want our students and our children to become as independent as they can and to live on their own to the extent that they can. A few years back, Jeffrey Arnett, a developmental psychologist, identified a new stage of development that he called emerging adulthood. And if you think back to when we just started having teenagers, back when maybe our grandparents or great-grandparents went from children to adults after 8th grade, and then we kind of moved into teenagerhood. Well, now a lot of teenagers are still not adults at 18. Between 18 and 25, especially the students we're working with ADHD, with autism, with all kinds of other learning challenges, it might even be longer. As we know, the ADHD brain doesn't really develop fully until about 25. And so this stage of development is one in which the young adult is not quite an adult. And so it makes sense if you think about where they are right now. They don't want to be a child, but they're scared to be an adult. And so they're right in that middle space. And for that reason, a lot of students are not ready for college because they really don't know what they want for their future. And I really like this cartoon because it shows that all of us are different. Everyone learns differently at different paces, and that's okay. As a parent, you may be thrilled that your child is doing really well in school and happy that your child is getting good grades. But you need to think about how much support that child is getting. If they're getting extra help from teachers and they have tutors for every subject or some subjects, and they have a coach for time management and organization, and parents you're helping with work or reminders, you've got a lot of scaffolding around that student. And when they leave home, all that scaffolding falls away. You don't realize how much structure is built in to a high school student's day. They don't have to plan much because it's all been planned for them. When they get to college, they might be in class 12 to 15 hours a week. They have the rest of the time unstructured, and they have to know how to structure it. And that is very difficult, and it can be overwhelming for a lot of students because they don't know how to do that. They relied on all the other people. So here's an example of parents who mean well. We're trying to reconcile her need for independence with our ability to run her life better than she does. And unfortunately, we all fall into that category at some time. We want to keep propping them up. We want to make sure that they're successful. But sometimes they need to really get there themselves in order to move on in life. So if we are planning for college, we need to consider not just the academic needs, but the social and emotional needs of the students when we're selecting colleges. It's extremely important for the student to have a good overall fit, especially with different learning styles. And the process for college should be student-driven. So if you as a parent are doing all the work, or you foresee that you'll be doing all the work, it's a good time to stop and think, is my child ready for college yet? The good news is they don't have to be, and we'll talk about some alternatives. But think about college readiness as a three-legged stool. You need the academic ability, but you also need to be emotionally regulated and have some social abilities. All three of these are equally important for success. And think about if one leg is missing and you've got instability, it's unbalanced. Now, we do know, of course, that some students develop better, stronger academically. They have asynchronous development. Their emotional social skills are far behind. But those need to be sort of, even if there's a disparity between them, the emotional social needs to at least be at a stage where you feel comfortable that the child can live on his own and make those decisions on his own. When you're looking at colleges or programs, transition programs, which we'll get to in a minute, colleges and programs want to see recent testing, typically within 3 years of admission, and they really prefer a WAIS over a WISC. Those of you that have testing are familiar with the WISC with your children, and the WAIS is for 16 and older. They prefer that. They also want to see academic tests of achievement, for example, Woodcock-Johnson, there are others. And they want to see a list of the recommended accommodations with a rationale for each. So if the student needs a rationale for math or foreign language substitution, that needs to be explicitly stated. And a lot of colleges will accept that and will help the student with that. But it has to be really clear why that is. Math is a little more difficult, but there are colleges that have quantitative requirements versus math, so they could take a math-related course, but not have to go through something like calculus. So what are some of the alternate paths for college? We have things like postgraduate year, transition programs, independent life skills programs, internship, and gap year programs. We're going to go into a little bit of detail about the differences of each, and certainly feel free to ask questions at the end if you need more information. So these programs, I break them up a little bit into PG year and transition, independent life skills, and internships. And you can see the type of student that fits into each. They do overlap. Sometimes they can be focusing on more than one. The PG year and the transition programs are typically at a boarding school, like a 13th year. They can also be standalone programs. Students who are just weaker skills, not independent learning, but maybe have stronger social skills might be a good example. But there are also programs for students with autism that would be fitting into the PG year. The independent life skills programs are the students who really do not handle their activities of daily living. They have poor social communication, poor executive functioning. They really need one-on-one to learn. And so there are programs here that can be career focused, can be academic, or can be a combination of the two. And then internship programs are typically for students who have the ability to go to college. They're pretty much ready, but they really just don't have a direction in their life, or they might need some help with motivation or managing their time and organization, but they're pretty ready. So you have a variety of options here. Here are some examples of PG year and transition programs. The initials are the names of the programs that they offer. The independent life skills programs, I kind of listed them in order of the level of the student. So Mansfield Hall, students do go to college while they're learning their independent life skills. College internship program and college living experience, you have a choice of going to college or being on a vocational track. Chapel Haven is mostly vocational, so is Vista. And Berkshire Hills Music Academy is for kids with autism or any intellectual developmental disabilities who love music. You don't have to be good at music, but if you like music, it's a wonderful program. And there's all kinds of ways that they integrate music. And then internships, there's a local program here in DC called Broad Futures, which is a wonderful internship program that you can do with your child living at home. They have a summer program and a winter program. And then Dynamy Internship Year is another example of an internship program where students live away and they learn some of the light skills about living on their own. It's almost as if they're going to college, but they're going to a job instead. But it's like the first year of college without the classes. So they're getting used to college in that sense. Gap year programs are a little bit different. I know that they kind of are an umbrella term, but gap year programs can be many things. Gap year programs can be for students who don't need to take a break, but want to take a break for a lot of reasons. Maybe they're burnt out from school. Maybe they do need a little bit of motivation, or maybe they just don't know what they want to study or do in life. So a good gap year program is going to have some goals. Students can develop leadership skills because they're in small groups. It definitely builds self-confidence. It can increase their social skills. They can grow. Most students do grow emotionally because they have to start to make decisions for themselves. And they can gain independence because they're expected to do things on their own. It's almost always experiential learning. I know sometimes parents are concerned that if we take a gap year, if my child takes a gap year, he's going to get off the track for learning. But a lot of students learn more outside the classroom than they do inside the classroom anyway. So this is a learning experience. They absorb information, and wherever they are, they're learning. Another area to think about is Think College. Think College is a website, is government site that was a nonprofit that came up with a list of schools that are offering students to go live on campus, but to take non-credit courses. So it's for students who want to have that college experience. They might take courses with modified homework assignments. They might be in the same classes as the students who are degree seeking, but they have the modifications. They might have some of their own classes. And they get to contribute and participate in campus activities and campus life and be part of the greater campus community. There are more and more colleges now that are providing these. And if you can go to thinkcollege.net, you will see there's been a lot of government funding for these programs. And here we have George Mason Life, not too far from where we are. UNC Greensboro has a program and Syracuse has a program. And those are just some examples. There are many colleges that have wonderful programs, and you can get a lot of information from Think College, and then that will lead you to the link to get to that particular program. So keep in mind that there are many paths to success. As we said, as I mentioned in the beginning, there is no one path. Okay? Every path takes a student as far as they can go, to independence. So whether they're starting with a gap year or a life skills program, and they take a gap year and go to college, or they go right to employment, all of these things equal success. There's no one way. It's whatever your child needs. And for example, at the bottom, high school, PG year, life skills, employment, that might take 4 years, but that's okay because there's no hurry, and you want to make sure that your child's ready for whatever the next step is. And so taking it slower, I mean, as the example I gave earlier of my daughter, she had a lot of anxiety throughout her life, but especially around going to college. And so she was in and out of community colleges because she had dropped out initially. And by the time she was 25, she decided, now I'm ready. And at 25, she went on, got her bachelor's degree, and went on to get a master's. But that wasn't until she was 30. So if you think about the 5-year lag with students with ADHD, at 25, or at 30, she was doing what you would expect at 25, but that was her path. And she's very successful in life today, but it just took her longer to get started. She would have been better off actually if she had had a job for those 4 or 5 years and then started college, and it would have been the same in the end. So let's briefly talk about the range of support on college campuses. You can see there's 4 categories that I've put together: basic ADA compliance, moderate support services, comprehensive program, and social support program. And here I have a chart, which you're going to get, by the way, that goes over the differences. So I won't spend a lot of time on it now, but just know that if you're looking at colleges and your child has any learning issues at all, you do not want to go to a college that has a basic ADA compliance that's just conforming to the law, because it's really not providing enough. Fortunately, most colleges are in the moderate category and they do provide some services. If you need a comprehensive program, it's because you need that same structure that you had in high school. And there are more and more colleges now that are providing social support for students on the autism spectrum or with ADHD and severe anxiety. So there's a lot of, your children are fortunate in this time because 20 years ago, none of these programs existed. So it gives them many more opportunities. And these are just some examples of colleges that fall into the moderate, the comprehensive, and the social support, just so you have an idea of, if you look at them, you can see that the selectivity of the college has no bearing on the level of support. There are many, many highly selective colleges that do a wonderful job of supporting their students. And there are some colleges that are non-selective that really don't offer support. So keep that in mind. Also, there are only 2 colleges in the country that are specifically for students with learning differences. And those are Landmark and Beacon College. Every other college in the country is a mainstream college that might have 25 or 30% of the students using support, but that's all. Okay, so there's not a big, large group of LD colleges or anything like that. These are some resources that can help with creating a college list. These online ones are clickable, and I have Think College on here. And College Web LD, which is a site that I put together, it is free. You can go on it and get information on about 400 colleges, and I could give them a star system on whether or not they're good for students with social communication disorders, for ADHD, for learning, specific learning disabilities. So that can be a help. And these books are also great books to use. The Colleges That Change Lives, we like to give that to parents because our philosophy shares their philosophy of making sure it's a good fit. The colleges themselves might not be the right colleges for your child, but it gives you an understanding of why fit really matters and how students can really thrive when they're in the right setting. So with that, I am open for questions, and I think Sue is going to field those questions.
Okay, yeah, great, thanks. Okay, that was really lots of great information. Here we go. Yeah, now we're going to turn to the Q&A. I don't think I saw any questions in the chat already, unless I missed any.
There actually are.
Are there? Okay.
Yeah.
Melissa, do you want to read a question then?
There were a couple of questions, but they weren't specific to the content. So if anyone has any questions, please do share those in the chat now.
Yeah, I think we've answered all the questions that were asked about, like whether people, just things that people missed, but I think we've filled them in.
About the two colleges that are specifically for LD, and those are not Dean, but Beacon College and Landmark College.
Yes.
Answered. Sorry.
And we do have a question from Elizabeth, and she asks, do you recommend any gap year programs that involve travel overseas?
That actually depends on your child. You know, there are some great programs that are very supported, that are well run. I would say that the best way to know is to talk to the program people and ask to talk to the program, the person in charge that will be going with the students, and get a sense of whether that person really understands your child's needs. Some programs are wonderful. They understand ADHD and they understand that some kids might need a little more supervision, but they might not understand autism and it might not be a good fit, but it's really program to program.
Judy, we have another question from Dion. Have you heard of some colleges like Beacon going virtual? It's difficult for learning disabled students to learn virtually.
The only time I know of colleges having gone virtual is when we were in the pandemic. Yes, it's very hard for students to learn virtually. And I know Beacon College actually never shut down. They had the students there the whole time because they're so small and they don't ever have more than 10 students in a class. So they were able to manage to stay open. But, you know, I don't think any colleges that I know of are going completely virtual. Some of them might have hybrid classes.
Thank you. A question from Mina. How do we specifically evaluate the services offered by a college?
That's a really good question. I would say the best way to do that is to go to the college to ask questions at the Disability Services Office. You need to know first what it is your child needs so that you can ask the right questions. For example, if your child needs a note taker because they can't take notes, does the school provide anonymous note takers? Or does the school provide a live scribe pen? You know, can your child use a live scribe pen? Would your child be willing to have someone ask someone for notes? That's not an accommodation, but if they're anonymous note takers, that's what you want. Also get a feel for the people and ask, you know, kind of ask your child to go with you and see, what does it feel like? Do I like these people? Do they seem caring? Do they seem like they really want to help? That's the best way to do it.
Judy, we have a question from Sharon. My daughter is graduating in January. Do you know of any alternative programs that are spring semester starts?
Yes, actually, many of them will take someone mid-year, so you can call if they have space. Dynamy definitely takes spring if they have it. And Broad Futures has a spring program that I believe starts in February. So if you're interested for your child to stay home, that would be a wonderful program. And a lot of the GAP programs are 3 or 4 months. They're not all full year. So I would just call and say, you know, do you have openings? I have a couple of students now that I'm working with who are seeking admission now. And some of the programs are looking at them to start in the next month or two.
Judy, another question from Dion. How should we decide between transition programs such as Mitchell and comparing it to traditional programs like the ones at Adelphi, Davis, and Elkins, and Warren Wilson?
Okay, so Mitchell has a program called THAMES. THAMES is their transition program. So Mitchell is the same as Adelphi, Davis, and Elkins. I wouldn't put Warren Wilson in that category, but Adelphi, Davis, and Elkins, West Virginia Wesleyan, and Mitchell, Dean, Curry, they're all the same. Mitchell happens to have a THAMES program, which is a developmental program towards college. So if that's what you're talking about, that is probably the only one left. There used to be others, but there aren't anymore. So what I would say is look at the college, see if it fits your child's needs, and they all could be. Warren Wilson is in a very different category. It's a work study program. and it's a little harder to get into. In fact, a good amount harder to get into than some of the other programs. And you have to be very motivated and independent to go there. But in terms of the other ones, they're comparable.
A great question from Cynthia, Judy. What type of program would you recommend for a child on the spectrum with no academic challenges, but social challenges?
That's great. The Mansfield Hall type of program, where the student needs the life skills and the social skills support and needs the small supported living, but can go on a time learning how to be a college student. The other option is a program like RIT, Rochester Institute of Technology, or Mercyhurst University, and they have planned social activities.
Judy, can you hang on a sec? I'm having trouble hearing you. I think you're cutting in and out. Is anyone else?
Structure that the students can go to. Any better or no?
Somehow, just in the last 30 seconds, it's starting to cut out.
Okay, let me try. Let me touch my mic. Hold on, let me get out of this. Let me stop sharing, and that will help.
Yeah.
Let me just get out of this and then try to figure out what's going on with my mic.
Thank you, everyone.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
That does sound better.
Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so what was that question I was answering again?
Sure. It was, what type of program would you recommend for a child on the spectrum with no academic challenges, but social challenges?
Yeah, the thing to think about is it depends on what you mean by academic. Does the child do really well in class and know the material? Or does the child have the executive function skills to get the homework done, to go for help when needed? And, that's all wrapped into academics. So I have a lot of students who are brilliant, but don't do the work, get overwhelmed easily with the assignments, can't keep track of things. But their academics are great if someone supports them. So a Mansfield Hall type of program would be great for that. If your child really, truly can do the academics, does all the work, doesn't need support necessarily in that area, maybe some executive functioning, then a program like RIT, Adelphi has a social support program, SUNY Purchase, if your child's interested in theater or music, Mercyhurst. Those are good programs. They're solid programs. They have social support. They understand students with autism.
Thanks for going over that again, Judy. A good question from Tambra. Do you know of any internship programs that involve working with animals?
Well, if you look at Broad Futures, you can ask them. They have many, many internships. And so that would be a question for them. Dynamy also has hundreds of internships available, and you can ask them. You can go on their website. They usually list them. They try to find internships that match up with the students. So it's in Worcester, Massachusetts. So there could be an animal shelter, or there could be someone who has a, what do they call them? Like a pet sanctuary where they need volunteers, things like that. So that is possible. At most places that have internship programs will try to match to the student.
Great, thank you. Judy, another question from Mina. She is interested in your input for potential options for kids with the GTLD profile.
Yes, students who are twice exceptional really struggle in a lot of ways because, as you know from high school, they're really not understood and they're really seen for what they can't do versus what they can do. In college, it's almost the opposite, that they're going to thrive in that academic environment if they're in the right academic environment. And oftentimes what happens is they can't get into the school that they should be in because their grades aren't good enough, even though we know they're brilliant. Their grades aren't good because of other factors. So a transition program can be a great way to build on that. Like, again, using Mansfield Hall or college living experience as an example, going to college part-time and getting good grades and getting that solid foundation will then allow them as a transfer student with really good college grades to go to that selective college where they really belong. And they're going to thrive in that college because they can take 3 or 4 classes, they can have breaks in between, they can study what they want to study in as much depth as they want to. And I've seen, if the students can get themselves through high school, I've seen such success with the students I've worked with that are twice exceptional.
Judy, we've got a good question from Tambra. When you say the process should be student-driven, are you thinking that they should be the ones seeking and exploring these gap year programs and evaluating the supports? Any suggestions for getting them to focus on these support details?
That's a great question. What I actually meant was that the college process should be student-driven. So if your child is ready for college, that means your child is ready to do some research, to visit, to ask questions, to do the applications and the essays, even with some support, but they're willing to do it. If they're not, I've seen times when parents just do all the work for them so they can get into the college, but they're not going to be able to do the work when they get there if they couldn't do the work in the first place. So in terms of gap years and all of that, no, I think parents should be very involved in that, at least narrowing down the list and then saying to your child, here are 3 or 4 programs, let's explore them together, let's learn about them, let's visit and see what might be best. But if you can narrow them down to ones that you feel comfortable with, then any choice would be okay. So just to clarify, thanks for asking that.
And as a follow-up question to that, Judy, Tamber had also asked, do you have any suggestions for getting students to focus on these support details?
I would say the best way, they're very concrete thinkers. So the best way is to go and visit either a program or a college, let the students talk to other students, talk to the people at the program. That's when they really understand what it's about. I just recently had a parent who was very against a program. And I said, please do me a favor, just call the director and talk to them directly. Express all your concerns, tell them what you're worried about. And then the parent went to the program. She fell in love with it. Her child fell in love with it. And now she gets it. And that's their first choice. But they wouldn't have ever considered it if I didn't say, go visit. So I think that's, and I'll tell you a quick story. I had a student years ago who really didn't put a lot of effort into his work, but he was very smart. He went to a college that he really wanted to go to and visited during spring break. He was so excited about that college. He came back and 4th quarter junior year, he had a 4.0. His dad said, how did that happen? I said, because now he sees the goal. The goal for him is he wants to go to this college. He could always make it happen, as we know a lot of our kids, if they have a short-term goal. But he did, he got in. So, visiting to me and having the child involved is good. But if they're not ready to do that, another way is whenever you take a vacation anywhere, you know how you always say, oh, let's go to the zoo or let's go to this museum. Why not? Let's go to this college. We're visiting, we're in this city. Why don't we go visit? I was in North Carolina with my daughter when she was in 9th grade. And I said, let's go visit Duke University. Let's see, it's supposed to be really pretty. And we just visited. But there was no expectation on her part that she was on a college tour for herself. So that's another way to make it easy. It's just step on a college campus without any reason other than, let's see, I hear this is a nice college. So that would be a way to kind of soften it a little bit.
Thanks, Judy. Great question from Judy and Zoe. She asks, please give us some idea of what these alternative programs cost. Is it the
Yes.
same as regular college programs?
Yes and no. There's a range. Some of the programs are very reasonably priced, like Dyname, Broad Futures, where Broad Futures, the students actually even get paid for their internship, even though you pay for the program. But then there are some very expensive programs, the ones that are the wraparound services. They're the same cost as a private college would be. Some of them do have scholarships. Some of them are 529 eligible, and if they're not, they're ABLE eligible. And I don't know the details of moving your 529 to an ABLE account, but I know that there are ways to use the funds. But yes, unfortunately, some of these are very expensive programs. One way to look at it is if your child can become independent through a program like this and live on his or her own, is that worth it to you to spend the money up front versus you being the support for your child for a number of years beyond? So it's a personal preference. And yes, these programs are incredibly expensive, but you are getting one-on-one, hands-on, 5 adults a day meeting with your child and making sure every aspect of their life is moving forward.
Thanks, Judy. A question from Dion. Does your team give advice on 529 ABLE eligible programs?
We do not specifically. We might, we might know some of them. I don't know. We don't do the financial piece, but I can recommend other people who are more familiar with financial aid and college and programs. I would say at this point, the best bet is really, if you find a program you're interested in, call them and ask them, they know if they accept the 529 funds or ABLE funds, because they're very aware of their clientele. So that would be the best way, I would think.
Great. We've covered all the questions in the queue. We can perhaps wait a little bit more so we can see if anyone else has any other questions. But I guess in the meantime, Judy, are there any resources that weren't mentioned in the PowerPoint that you'd like to bring to bear now and let our participants know about?
Well, I did put in, I think, the Gap Year Association. That's a really good one to read about. They rate now the quality and the supervision level of the Gap Year program. So you can see, I think it's a 1 to 4 or 1 to 5, how supervised that is. There are Gap Year programs that are accredited by the Gap Year Association, and there are some that are not accredited, but they're still on there and they're listed separately. So you can get a lot of information from that. There is, I think I can't remember the name of it, Young Adult Transitions. They also have a website. I'll have to get the name of that and I'll send it to you. I should have thought of it ahead of time. It's not coming to my mind. There's a Young Adults Transitions website that a lot of the programs put their information on. So that's another way to look at different programs. And there are some programs that are, these programs that I've talked about are not therapeutic, but there are some programs that have a therapeutic component and also work with students with autism or ADHD. And they recognize that some students are sort of straddling mental health and their learning challenges. And so some programs have come up with that. It's like a light therapeutic where it's maybe therapy on campus or group therapy, or you have your individual therapist, but they do cover some of that.
Thank you so much, Judy, for those additional resources. We do have another question from Melanie. Even if my child is thinking of a gap year or an alternate path, do you recommend a student apply to colleges while still in high school and maybe defer?
That's an excellent question. Yes, if you believe that your child is going to go to college after a year or even a 2-year transition, The best way to do this is to apply to college if they're willing to do it, and let them know that it's for the next year, so they maybe will be less anxious. But it makes it a lot easier to get the teacher recommendations, to get the transcript sent. You do have to choose your college though. So let's say you apply to 5 colleges, you get into all 5. You do have to declare to one college, yes, we are accepting your offer, and then you request the deferral, which almost always you get. But you have to tell the other 4 colleges, no, you can't keep 5 colleges in the mix. But the good thing is a lot of students grow out of the college they think they wanted to go to when they go to a gap year program, and that's fine. There's no obligation on your part to go to that college you deferred to. You just let them know early enough and they're like, that's fine. We just put you on next year's list and we'll accept someone else. So it's not an issue, to worry about. And it does happen sometimes, which is a good thing that the student has outgrown what they thought they needed. But yes, definitely try to do it before.
Judy, this is in reference to your discussion a moment ago about therapeutic program options. Sophie is asking, do you have any recommendations for those therapeutic options?
It depends on the need. There's, what the best thing would be is to email me. I do have a list of some. I just can't think of which ones are specifically for kids with autism and therapeutic versus more mental health and substance abuse therapeutic. There's a range. But if you would email me, or if anybody's interested, feel free to email me and I can give you a list of those.
Terrific. Last call for questions, everyone. This has been a great Q&A session.
Good questions. Really good questions too.
Dion is asking Judy, have you heard of Lynn University?
Absolutely.
I
should
just their program.
It's an excellent program. I've been there many times. They do a great job of helping students mostly with language-based learning and ADHD and executive functioning. They don't have a specific social support, but again, depending on your child, it could be a good fit if you're focusing more on the executive function piece. But they have trained coaches and they're excellent. They're really, really good, but it has to be the right fit. Lynn was one of the first colleges in the country to have a support program like this. And also, by the way, before COVID, I spent about 25 to 30% of my time traveling, and I visit colleges all over the country and I meet with the learning specialists. So I do know all of these colleges very well, which is how we're able to kind of make a fit for a student. But Lynn is good. And I saw somebody pop up a question about McDaniel. McDaniel also has excellent support. It has a very informal social support for the kids on autism spectrum, but it's there. And I've sent kids there and they're very successful and happy.
A couple of other questions have come in, Judy. One from Judy and Zoe. How do you proceed in your practice to guide these choices? At this point, I have in mind a child who needs help and is about to graduate.
Well, what we do is we work with students when they start as juniors for about 1.5 years. So we do a lot of assessments, we do interviews, we talk to the parents, we read their neuropsych, we get to know them really well. And as we get to know them and their personality, we can then match them to schools that meet not their only academic, but their social emotional needs. For example, if you have a child who's very preppy, you want to go to a college where those kids are going to be very similar. That's only one aspect of it, but it's an important one. If you have a student who, is an alternative kind, purple hair and earrings, they're not going to go to a college that the kids are all preppy. So again, those are small things, but they can make a big difference. Some kids want to go to a Southern university is a good example. If they don't come from a Southern culture, they have to understand the difference of how the football games are, how everybody dresses up for them, how everybody's in a sorority. There are certain customs that are different. And if it's not you're not going to fit, even if you like it academically. So we look at all of that. And it's not just the learning support you need. We want to make sure that the child is successful. So we do a lot of work, not just to help you get in, but to be successful.
A few more questions, Judy, have come in from Tambra. Do you have any thoughts regarding whether it is good for students to be among more typical peers or be in a population of kids on the spectrum, such as Landmark or Beacon?
Okay, well, both Landmark and Beacon have a wide range of students. They're not students just with autism, they're students with dyslexia, students with ADHD. So there are a lot of hidden disabilities, and you don't know, like, both of those places serve just kids with LD, but a wide range. So in that sense, there are going to be differences. But I would say that it depends on your child. Some kids are much more comfortable knowing that they can be themselves in a group of people who get them. Other kids feel like they want to be in a neurotypical environment and can do that. I don't have a preference. I think it's up to the student's comfort level. I have some kids who go to Beacon and say, this is where I want to be, found my people. They all can accept me for who I am. I don't have to worry about being embarrassed about my dyslexia or about my social faux pas and, things like that. I'm comfortable. So it's an individual decision.
Judy, a question from Dion. What about programs like Spire that mix athletics and academics? It seems light on the academics. Are there other athletic programs for kiddos on the spectrum?
Well, it depends on what age group you're talking about. I mean, I think it sounds like you're talking about more of the transition or the postgraduate year to college, where senior gap year, yeah. So there's a program in, I think it's Maine, that's very strong athletically, but they don't really focus on the learning support piece. I'll tell you one college that I think is good for that is Dean College, because Dean College has athletics and it has an excellent learning support program. It is a 4-year college, but you can go for a year or two as a transition and transfer somewhere else. And I've had students do that as well, because they have a football team and they have people come to recruit, because some of the students go there because their grades weren't good enough to get into the school where their football was good enough. And some vice versa, they want to play D1, so their grades are okay, but they want to get more experience, just like if they went to a prep school. So there aren't too many of them that really mix with the kids who need the support, unfortunately.
Okay, well, it looks like we've come to a bit of a lull in the chat, which is right on time. So thank you so much, Judy, for that wonderful Q&A.
And I do want to add too, please, anyone, feel free to email me anytime and contact me. I'm happy to answer questions. If you have any short questions like these that I can answer for you, I'm happy to do that, or at least direct you towards another person that can help you.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Judy. This is tons of great information. And I just want to let the audience know that Judy's slideshow will be posted on our website, and you will also receive an email in the next day or two, which will have a link to the recording of this. And as Judy said, I will put her contact information in that email as well, so you'll be able to reach her. You can also find her on her website. So you have many ways to contact Judy. Mm-hmm. And so that's it. I'm going to put in the chat right now a link to the feedback form. So after all of our events, we always have a feedback form, and we really, really would love it if you would answer there's only 2 questions on it. It'll be quick, but that's very helpful to us in organizing our events. Okay, so look for that email in the next day or two. And thank you so much for coming. And Judy, thank you so much for all that great information.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Really, really helpful. Okay, everyone, enjoy the rest of your day. Take care.
Bye.